This video will briefly demonstrate the functionality of the Timeline Plot feature in APT. The Timeline Plot is useful for providing a visual sense of the flow of activities involved in scheduling your proposed observations, and can provide insight into the details of the overhead times being assessed to your visits and observations. It may also be useful when planning coordinated parallel observations. We start with a MIRI MRS observation selected in the form editor. This observation contains 3 visits. Note that the APT is reporting a science time of about 21,000 seconds and a total charge time of about 47,000 seconds. We would like to understand more about the overheads involved in this observation. To do so, we move to the top toolbar and click on the Timeline Plot. And now you see the 3 visits are shown in a timeline form below, where the cross-hatched regions are science exposures and the colored bars are various different kinds of overheads. You can look at an individual observation, or a visit I should say, or the entire observation at one time. The first thing you notice is that you can scale the plot instead of by seconds to minutes. If you prefer to do that, you can just click back and forth between those 2 options. The next control at the bottom here shows that you can zoom in the horizontal format to see more detail. And of course, as things are going off the screen to the right, you can then use the slider bar to go over and see things that are off the screen, or to come back down to lower. You can actually go to 0.5 as well, which gets pretty ridiculous in this case, but may be useful in other cases. Okay, the other thing you can do is, for the labeling of the plot, ask for more detail in 2 steps. One click gives you a little bit more detail, and another click gives you lots more detail. And of course, in this particular case with a complex observation, you get lots and lots of labels on things. So you can control that up and down. Or you can also use this command over here that says left click to expand and right click to close elements. And this can be handy for a couple of different things. For instance, if you want to just zoom up on or give more detail on a single a visit like this one, you can left click on the observation here and you get more detail, or if you right click, it comes back down on that individual visit. So you can do that, control that on the individual visit level if you prefer. Now, if you'd like to see the details of what each of the overheads are, you can hover over the individual color bars, and it tells you what the overhead is, in this case visit slew, and the length that is being charged for that. Each new observation is charged with an 1800 second initial slew for the observation, and that's what this large bar is. And you can see that the slew is much shorter in the follow-up visits. Okay? You can hover over any of the bars and see what they are. In this case, this is a visit overhead charge. Probably rolls up a number of smaller things into what is called the visit overhead. So you don't see the entire detail of what's going on, but it gives you a pretty good idea of what the overheads are. Obviously, you can hover over any of the overheads and it will tell you some details in a pop-up menu. I'll just note that also in JDox there is an article called APT Graphical Timeline, and it includes this key to the colors of the different overheads, and you can refer to that for specific details as well. But I think in most cases you will probably just use the hover technique to see what a given overhead is. And again, if you have to zoom up to see more detail of a given overhead, for instance, to get into these details here, you can do that by zooming in. Okay. Now we'll look at a little bit more complex example. Okay, so now I have displayed a near-cam observation, and in this case we have a near-cam imaging observation with a coordinated parallel with MIRI imaging in parallel. You can see in the form editor the specifications of the near-cam imaging observation with its dithers specified here, and the exposure specification down below. If you click up on the MIRI tab, you can now see the MIRI parallel observation that works with that primary observation. The timeline is an easy way to see the relative length of those 2 observations as they've been specified. And so here now in the timeline, and again you see this observation has 4 visits, relatively long primary observations with near cam are specified here. And down below each of those you can see that there's the parallel observation with the MIRI camera taking the imaging there. This is an example where the left and right clicking might be useful. For instance, you can actually expand up with a left click just on the parallel to see more details of some of the labeling there, right-click to go back down, or you can click on the primary observation and see more detail and come back down as well. Of course, you can also use the more detail and less detail buttons to highlight that as well. This is particularly useful if you have specified an initial guess at your parallel observation and maybe it had only used half of the available time. If you can expand that observation out to make the observation longer and use that time, this is an easy way to see it in the timeline plot. So in this example, you can see the long exposures by the primary, and the user has actually specified the MIRI observation to fill in that quite effectively. This concludes a quick look at the APT graphical timeline. See the referenced JDox articles for more detailed information.